Welcome back to Meet the Candidates. First part, here talking about women's issues, Women Voters Matter. My name is Jewel Green, and I am one of the moderators here today as the chairperson of Caribbean Women in Leadership Trinidad and Tobago chapter. And our other moderator is here with us, Ms. Terry Ince, the head of CEDAW Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome back, Terry.
Thank you.
And viewers, we thank you for rejoining us here. We are here chatting with another candidate, Mr. Ricardo Phillip from the Class Action Reform Movement. Welcome, Mr. Phillip.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Tobago, Trinidad, the rest of the world. Always appreciate being here.
Excellent. And you're here because you're the candidate for Tobago West. Yes?
Correct.
We're so happy to have you here joining us today, and I wanna jump right in. When we look at the private sector, when we look at what we're doing in terms of gender equality, women and men participating in the business world, and I ask this because I know you're an entrepreneur. So when we look at the business world in terms of the gender parity, in terms of proportionate representation, from your point of view, are you seeing enough women taking part in business in Tobago, and not just in the micro, but in heading from medium to macro levels of business as an entrepreneur yourself? And if not, what are you planning to do to bridge that gap? And if yes, how are you planning to keep that going?
Well, I think women has fundamentally the desires and ambition to pursue, and Tobago in particular has always demonstrated, women has always been demonstrated as leaders, has taken leadership position in raising their families and taking care of a lot of important issues and social responsibilities in as far as our history is concerned. However, the protection of women and women's rights and ensuring that women will continue to pursue their goals and desires has to do with ensuring that your justice system and your system of justice is effective, ensuring that women, by virtue of the constitutional protection and guarantee, by virtue of your institution and the arms of government that protects women, will be a strong part of your social system and your state, and that allows women now to pursue, regardless of their race and religious belief and so on, because women have been treated as though as the weaker entity for generations and for throughout history. And you want to look at your culture and how does your culture interpret that? How does your culture perceive women? And if your culture perceives women as a weaker, then you have to, women and young girls and children and elderlies and so on, you have to ensure that you provide the necessary protections and guarantees to ensure that these women and these groups are protected.
I couldn't agree with you more. But in terms of business and entrepreneurship, what is your perspective in terms of what's happening in terms of women being involved, running businesses in the C-suite, CEOs, CFOs of businesses in Tobago, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, as we look at the macro level of business?
Well, I am very particular, and a good question. I'm very particular with proportionate representation for women outside of the qualification, because I honestly believe I'm an employer, I have a lot of women working for me, and one of my policies is to give women the same rights and the same opportunities I would give to a male. But you have to be qualified, you have to be willing, you have to desire, you have to want to, because to simply say to proportionate and you're just looking at numbers, I think that put women at a risk. And I think that debate is more so in the US, where the debate on private sector ensuring that a certain percentage of women is employed on the basis of race. I think that's a risky and very dangerous proposition. However, I think that we have to afford women the opportunity to honing their skills and to qualify themselves without, any kind of prejudice, any kind of bias and so on, and without the need for having exchange sexual favors for achieving those goals. I think that's where the protection and the guarantees comes in. Because if it is that I'm just, let's say, for example, that Caribbean Airlines want to hire women and based on the gender, and we want to balance the gender and create this sense of equality and not ensure that that woman is particularly qualified and ensure that the channel for that qualification is available and open and accessible to women, then what we create, we lower the standard for women, and I think that is a very risky proposition. If a woman wants to pursue whatever she wants to pursue, we must be able to, as a society, allow and facilitate that woman to be able to pursue that. So whether it's in corporate, whether it's in the private sector, rather, in politics, in the government, in the public sector, small business, micro business, corporate business, corporate sector, a woman must be able to pursue her desires and her ambitions and her goals based on her qualification. And all we need to do is ensure that she's protected in the pursuance of that, and not necessarily because she's a woman. And if we hold that argument, what we are doing, as I said, we lower the standard for women, and we make it becomes ineffective, and then it turns the argument around that women is not capable, which I don't agree. I believe women are very, very capable. The problem that we have, the challenge we have, is to ensure that we allow them the facility to be able to pursue that.
I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense on the surface level. Let me just add something to this discussion. When we look at the numbers that for women, females coming out of university, in terms even from SEA level, we are seeing that more women are qualified in terms of getting into school, staying in school, and becoming qualified. Those numbers that are matriculating out of university are higher than men. So the question is always, when we look at, affirmative actions, quote unquote, quotas, we are asking the question, are women qualified when we're looking at that? But the data is saying that we're overqualified. We're more qualified than a lot of the men in their, comparative situations in terms of age. So I would have to add to that, while we're looking to make sure women are able to pursue whatever qualification they want, we also want to remember that on the level of education, we are seeing some higher numbers for women. So the question is, if we're seeing higher numbers of women coming out of university, getting PhDs, masters, diploma, certificate, why aren't we seeing a higher number of women in the positions that call for those qualifications? So we do have some disparity, and I just wanted to bring that up because a lot of persons tend to have this conversation about, but is she qualified? And the data is telling us yes.
Well, more than just qualification, I think is the other factors, there are other social and religious and I can imagine other factors that will determine what a woman's interests are. And if you look at the same data, you might see that some women would prefer to pursue corporate work or sectorial work, as the case may be, and the numbers of women want to be bricklayers and women want to be mechanics and so on is a very small percentage, even though they might be qualified. So I'm saying here that those are factors that it may be beyond the control of government and control of policymakers and so on. What you want to ensure, again, as I said, that women are encouraged to and make it possible for women to pursue other type of career activities and so on.
I agree with you, Mr. Phillip. Before you go, I just want to give you the opportunity to tell the viewers, from your perspective, if and when you get elected into office, what is the first thing that you think needs to be addressed in terms of gender issues, gender equality in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, there's this international debate on gender, the word gender, and I think in this country we have to know our position as far as gender is concerned, whether or not we subscribe to two genders or we are subscribing to another theory of gender and so on. We have to establish that, and I think that the women organization have to articulate on behalf of women, and in some part, and not a small part, however, what are the genders, what you're talking about. When we talk about gender now, if you use the word gender, you include all kind of, as a matter of fact, in some arguments, some saying that there's about 100 and more different type of genders. So I think one of the things that we have to do is to determine what women is accepting, what women is saying. Organization like yours, what are we putting forward in terms of gender? But more importantly, I think for an elected official, what is important is ensuring that you have an effective justice system, an effective system of justice to ensure that women and other groups are protected, has the rights are being recognized. And I think, once you establish that, once that happens, then I think women will have the platform now, a fair chance of pursuing their desires and their goals. I think the problem is that the hindrances in terms of how society sees you, in the social interpretation of women, the economic exchange for women, expertise and so on. Once we can establish and create a level playing field, if we talk about gender equality, a level playing field has to be by law, integrated into our law and our policies to ensure that women has all the rights too. Because we're not talking about competing, we're talking about having the right to pursue some of your goals and desires and so on.
I agree, and I thank you for sharing your perspective with us today. Mr. Ricardo Phillip, the candidate for Tobago West with Class Action Reform Movement. And we are going to be chatting now with another candidate,